We continue in the 30th chapter, where the Alter Rebbe is giving a method, a way that the Beinoni, who has mastery over thought, speech, and action, can own further and deeper their lives, and how they can humble themselves before every human being, ultimately. Literally, I don't know if it means Attila the Hun, Stalin, and the like, and Hitler, Yimach Shemam. Your neighbor, your community member, who might be someone who is maybe not so refined like the Beinoni, who has got mastery over thought, speech, and action. So today in the discussion, the Alter Rebbe goes further on how the Beinoni owns everything, even when it comes to the negative. Now, how could you compare the negative behavior of someone who has mastery over thought, speech, and action compared to the negative behavior of someone who's a kal shebekalim, meaning someone who's very far removed, distant from divine service, very, pleasure-seeking individual, and the negativity that will come from that individual is going to be much greater than that which will come from the Beinoni. Yet, the Beinoni isn't seeing things in the terms of results, or should I say, in terms of results. In other words, the staying away from negativity of the Beinoni is pretty much there. And the negativity of another person who is not near the league of the Beinoni is no comparison. However, there is a comparison in the effort. And that's the discussion over here. So, turning away from evil. Sumera. So a person can discover in themselves that they don't turn away completely and totally from negativity. In other words, in a situation where that which is obvious, so you turn away from it. But that which is not so obvious, it's harder to turn away and to wage a battle in that area. So for example, you're in the middle of a pleasant conversation. And in that pleasant conversation, permissible, pleasant conversation, there's a little slight discredit that will come to your fellow. A slight, very slight slur. And it might be just to exonerate yourself. For example, the Talmud speaks that Rabbi Shimon said to his father, who was Yehuda Nasi, the Rabbeinu HaKodesh, the one who is the author of the Mishnah, lived in the 2nd century. So there was a problematic bill of divorce, a get. It was written improperly. So the father, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, thought that it was his son that wrote it improperly. So he asked him. So he said, I did not write it. And then he added, Yehuda the tailor wrote it, which is a minor slur to exonerate himself. His father yet replied to him, keep away from slander. In other words, even a slight thing to exonerate yourself and thereby implicate somebody else is a slight slander. Now, maybe sometimes that's necessary. Maybe the son thought that was necessary, but the father said, no, it wasn't necessary. It was keep away from slander. The same applies, continues the Alter Rebbe, in similar things that occur frequently, right? That are like borderline, and especially when it comes to sanctifying yourself, meaning in refraining from an indulgence of something that's permissible in permitted matters. which is a biblical commandment that you should, sanctify yourself. Kedoshim tihiyu, that you should be holy. And not only in biblical matters, but even when it comes to rabbinic enactments that are sometimes even more strict than biblical law. And yet, a person can find themselves that they are succumbing to a permissible indulgence, right? In other words, it's permissible, but if you would be battling with it, the Beinoni we're talking about, battling in that area, being that it's not exactly the worst thing in the world that you're battling with, so then, the nature will be that you kind of, don't wage the battle. And this is similar to, among other things, it says that a person tramples over underfoot, being insensitive to those things that that are not so crucial, but important nonetheless. In other words, because we've trampled on them so often underfoot, we begin to feel that they are completely permissible. Of course, we're not talking about things that are prohibited, obviously. We're talking about the very borderline. And then that becomes something in our minds that, okay, it's okay, because we've trampled upon it several times.